I stared at the email on my phone, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. The subject line read, NVDA stock split announcement, 100-1 effective June 10th. June 10th. Exactly 1 month from today. Emily, are you even listening to me? My mother's shrill voice cut through my thoughts. Your sister needs this money. The venue requires the deposit by tomorrow, or she loses everything. Everything. I looked up from my phone at the 5 faces arranged around my parents' dining table like a tribunal. Mom, with her arms crossed and that pinched expression she always wore when I disappointed her. Dad staring at his hands, the coward who never stood up for me. My older sister Jennifer examining her fresh manicure with a smug smile. Her fiancé Brandon looking uncomfortable but saying nothing. And Jennifer's best friend Sloane, who had somehow earned a seat at this family meeting while I was treated like a hostile witness. The venue isn't going to wait, Jennifer said, not even looking at me. And you're the only one with liquid assets. It's just stocks, Em. You can buy more later. Just stocks. The Nvidia shares my grandmother had given me before she died. The only inheritance I'd received while Jennifer got the house in Connecticut. The shares I'd held onto for 8 years, through every financial emergency, every time my family came begging. The shares that, in exactly 30 days, would split 100-1 and make me a millionaire several times over. But they didn't know that. Because this was my second time living through this nightmare. How much does she need? I asked quietly, even though I knew the answer. I'd lived this conversation before, 5 years ago in my original timeline. I'd sold the shares for $180,000 to fund Jennifer's fairy tale wedding. 1 month later, I'd watched in horror as those same shares exploded in value. The $180,000 I'd given up would have been worth $18 million after the split, $18 million. In my first life, that loss had destroyed me. I'd spiraled into depression, quit my job, burned through my savings. My family had abandoned me when I needed them most, annoyed by my bitterness over just money. I'd died at 32, alone in a studio apartment, from a combination of pneumonia and the simple fact that I'd stopped caring whether I lived. Then I'd woken up in this body, in this moment, 5 years earlier. May 10th, 2024. The day of the family meeting. The day they'd pressured me into the worst decision of my life. Not this time. Jennifer needs $180,000 for the venue deposit, Mom said. And before you start with excuses, we've already looked into it. Your Nvidia stock is worth approximately $220,000 right now. You sell it, give Jenny the money she needs, and you'll still have $40,000 left over. It's more than fair. More than fair? I repeated slowly. You want me to liquidate my entire inheritance? The only thing Grandma left me, so Jennifer can have her dream wedding? Don't be dramatic, Jennifer snapped, finally looking at me. It's not like you're doing anything with that money anyway. It just sits there. At least this way it's going towards something meaningful, something that creates memories. In my first life, I'd caved at this point. I'd felt the weight of their expectations, the lifetime of being told I was selfish, difficult, the problem child. I'd sold the stock. This time, I felt that old familiar pressure building in my chest. But underneath it was something new, something cold and hard as diamond. Knowledge. Let me think about it, I said. The table erupted. Think about it? Jennifer's voice hit a pitch that could shatter glass. My wedding is in 3 months, Emily. I don't have time for you to think about it. Your sister is asking for help, Dad said, finally speaking up. Of course, only to support Jennifer. Family helps family. Where was the family when I needed help with grad school? I asked, quietly. I seem to remember taking out $80,000 in student loans while Jennifer got her education fully funded. That was different, Mom said quickly. Jennifer was studying business. You wanted to get a master's in literature. We weren't going to throw money away on something impractical. The irony was almost funny. My impractical literature degree had led to a career in content strategy that now paid me $140,000 a year. Jennifer's business degree had led to her quitting 3 jobs in 2 years before settling into unemployment and a wealthy fiancé. But I didn't say that. I was playing a longer game now. I'll think about it, I repeated, standing up. I need to review my finances, talk to my advisor. This is my entire safety net you're asking me to give up. Safety net? Sloan laughed, actually laughed. Emily, you make good money. You don't need a safety net. Stop being so paranoid. I looked at Sloan, this woman who contributed nothing to my family but had somehow become Jennifer's surrogate sister, and felt my smile grow cold. In my previous life, Sloan had been at that wedding, dripping in designer clothes funded by her trust fund, posting Instagram stories about the most beautiful day ever while I'd eaten ramen and cried. I'll let you know by tomorrow, I said, grabbing my purse. Emily Margaret Harrison, you sit back down this instant, Mom commanded. I paused at the door. In my first life, I would have sat. I would have obeyed. I said, I'll let you know tomorrow. That's my final answer. I walked out to a symphony of outraged voices. My apartment was in a modest building in Brooklyn, a one-bedroom I'd spent years making into a sanctuary. I poured myself a glass of wine and pulled up my Fidelity account on my laptop. There they were, 1,247 shares of NVIDIA, currently trading at $176.43 per share. Total value, $220,067.221. In 30 days, those shares would split 100 to 1. My 1,247 shares would become 124,700 shares. And in months that followed, as NVIDIA's AI chips became the backbone of the generative AI boom, those shares would climb to over $900 per share. I did the math again, even though I'd done it 1,000 times since waking up in this second chance at life. 124,700 shares, x $900, $112,230,000. $112 million. That's what my grandmother's gift would become if I just held on for 18 months. That's what I'd given up in my first life for Jennifer's wedding. A wedding that had ended in divorce within 2 years when Brandon cheated with a yoga instructor. My phone buzzed. Jennifer, of course. Jennifer, I can't believe you're being so selfish about this. It's my wedding. Jennifer, do you know how humiliating it will be if I have to tell everyone we lost the venue? Jennifer, Mom and Dad are so disappointed in you right now. I silenced my phone and opened my laptop to my revenge planning document. Yes, I'd actually created a spreadsheet. 5 years of reliving. My biggest mistakes had taught me to be thorough. The beautiful thing about having lived through this before was that I knew every single thing that would happen in the next 5 years. Not just the stock split, though that was the crown jewel. I knew that Mom's friend Cheryl would ask to borrow $50,000 in 3 months, never to repay it. I knew Dad's business partner would embezzle funds in November, nearly bankrupting him. I knew Jennifer's marriage would implode spectacularly, and she'd come crawling back to our parents, moving into their house with her ego shattered and her trust fund fiancé gone. But more than that, I knew exactly who my family really was. I'd learned it the hard way, watching them abandon me in my darkest moments, annoyed by my depression, dismissive of my pain. They'd made it clear I was only valuable to them as a resource to be extracted. Well, this time, I was going to be a very different kind of resource. I opened a new browser tab and searched for the article I knew would be published tomorrow, Why NVIDIA is Poised to Dominate the AI Revolution. The article that in my original timeline I'd read 2 days after selling my shares, the article that had made me realize what I'd given up. This time I'd be ready. My phone buzzed again. Mom, this time. Mom, your father and I have decided if you don't help your sister, you are not welcome at family events anymore. We will not tolerate this selfishness. I stared at the message, feeling that old panic rising up. In my first life, this threat had terrified me. I'd been so afraid of losing my family, of being cut off, of being alone. Then they'd cut me off anyway, the moment I became inconvenient. I typed out my response carefully. I understand. I'll make my decision by tomorrow evening. Let them sweat. The next morning, I called in sick to work. I had planning to do. First stop, my attorney's office. I'd found Lisa Chen in my first life 3 years too late when I was trying to contest my parents' decision to pressure Jennifer into declaring me mentally unfit to handle my own finances. Lisa had been brilliant then, even though there was nothing she could do. This time, I was hiring her preemptively. Emily Harrison? Lisa looked up from her desk, younger than I remembered, but with the same sharp eyes. Please, sit. You said on the phone this was urgent. I need to protect my assets from my family, I said directly, and I need to do it in a way that's completely airtight. Lisa's eyebrows rose. Tell me everything. I did, leaving out the rebirth part, but explaining the pressure, the family dynamics, the history of financial manipulation. Lisa listened, taking notes, her expression growing darker. First thing, she said when I finished, we create a revocable living trust. You'll be the trustee, but the assets are protected. If anyone tries to claim you were coerced or incompetent, the trust structure provides evidence of your sound mind and clear intentions. Perfect. Second, I want you to document every interaction with your family regarding this money. Texts, emails, recordings if you're in a one-party consent state, which you are. Build a paper trail. Already started, I said, pulling out my phone to show her the messages. Lisa smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. I think we're going to work well together. By noon, the trust was established. My NVIDIA shares transferred into it, and I had a legal shield that would make it nearly impossible for my family to touch my assets. It cost me $5,000 in legal fees. Money well spent. Second stop, a meeting with my boss. Karen Chen was the VP of Content at TechVision, a tech media company where I worked as a senior content strategist. In my first life, I'd quit this job in my depression spiral, burning a bridge I could never rebuild. This time, I was going to play it very differently. Emily, Karen said, gesturing to the chair across from her desk, I was surprised to get your meeting request. Everything okay? More than okay, I said, pulling out the printed article I'd saved. I want to pitch you on a major feature series, the AI revolution and the companies that will define it. NVIDIA, AMD, Microsoft, Google. I want to do deep dives on how AI is about to transform everything and why we're at an inflection point. Karen leaned forward, interested. Go on. Tomorrow, a major article is dropping about NVIDIA's position in AI development. It's going to start a conversation. I want us to be ahead of it, not chasing it. I've already outlined a 12-part series. I slid my proposal across the desk. I'd spent years in my first life watching the AI boom from the sidelines, knowing I could have been part of the conversation. This time, I was going to be the voice that defined it. Karen flipped through my proposal, her eyes widening. This is incredibly detailed. Emily, have you been holding out on me? This is senior editor level work. I want the senior editor position, I said. I know it's opening up when Marcus leaves next month. I want to be considered. In my first life, I'd never applied. I'd been too depressed, too defeated. The position had gone to someone less qualified who'd made half the impact I could have. Karen studied me. You know what? I'm going to advocate for you. This pitch alone shows me you're thinking strategically. Get me the first 3 articles by end of next week, and the job is yours. I walked out of that meeting with a plan that would not only secure my career, but position me as an expert in the exact field that would dominate the next 5 years. Every article I wrote about NVIDIA and AI would be a public timestamp of my conviction, my foresight, and it would make what happened next so much sweeter. By 6 p.m., my phone had 37 missed calls and 63 text messages. I read through them while eating Thai takeout, marveling at how quickly my family had descended into full-on harassment. Jennifer, the venue just called. If we don't pay by midnight, we lose it. This is on you. Mom, I hope you can live with yourself destroying your sister's happiness. Dad, call me immediately. We need to talk about your attitude. Sloan, I always knew you were jealous of Jenny. This just proves it. And the crown jewel from Jennifer's fiancé, Brandon. Brandon, look, I get that family stuff is complicated, but Jennifer is in tears. Is some stock really worth hurting her like this? Be the bigger person. Be the bigger person. I'd been the bigger person my entire first life. I'd been the bigger person right into an early grave. At 6:30 p.m., I sent my response to the family group chat. Me. I've thought carefully about this and my answer is no. I will not be selling my stock to fund Jennifer's wedding. I've worked hard for my financial security and I'm not willing to sacrifice it. I'm sorry if this disappoints you, but my decision is final. My phone immediately started ringing. I declined the call, then typed out one more message. Me. To be clear, I love you all and I hope Jennifer has a beautiful wedding, but my inheritance from grandma is not a family ATM. I'm sure you'll find another solution. Good luck. Then I muted the group chat and poured myself another glass of wine. The email started arriving within minutes. Mom sent a 5-paragraph essay about sacrifice and family values. Dad sent a curt message about how I'd changed, and not for the better. Jennifer sent a stream of consciousness rant that I didn't bother finishing. But the most interesting message came from my Aunt Carol, Dad's sister, who I'd barely heard from in years. Aunt Carol, good for you, Emily. Your grandmother would be proud. Don't let them bully you. That stock was her gift to you. She knew exactly what she was doing when she left it to you and not them. I stared at that message for a long time. Aunt Carol had been estranged from the family. In my first life, a rift that started around this time. I'd never known why. Now I was beginning to understand. She'd seen through them long before I had. Me. Thank you, Aunt Carol. That means more than you know. Aunt Carol. Coffee sometime? I'd love to catch up away from the drama. Me. I'd like that. See, that was the thing about second chances. You didn't just get to fix your mistakes. You got to discover things you'd missed the first time around. The next week was a masterclass in family manipulation tactics. They tried everything. The guilt trip, Mom. Your grandmother is rolling in her grave watching you be so selfish. The gaslighting, Dad. You're not thinking clearly. Maybe you should talk to someone about this fixation on money. The victim card, Jennifer. You've ruined my entire life. I hope you're happy. The flying monkey, Sloan. Everyone's talking about how you've changed. People are worried about you. The fake peacemaking, Brandon. Let's all just calm down and find a compromise. None of it worked, because I'd lived through worse. I'd lived through losing everything, through dying alone and forgotten. I'd lived through them abandoning me when I needed them most. Compared to that, their current tantrum was nothing but noise. Meanwhile, I was thriving. My first article about NVIDIA and the AI revolution went live and immediately started trending. My analysis was sharp, prescient, and caught the attention of some major players in the tech industry. By the end of the week, I had 3 offers to speak on podcasts and 1 invitation to a conference panel. Karen called me into her office on Friday. The senior editor position is yours, she said without preamble. Marcus's last day is the 15th. You start the new role on the 16th. Congratulations. Thank you, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. In my first life, I'd been jobless by this point, drowning in regret. Now I was getting promoted. Emily, I have to ask, where did this come from? You've always been good, but this past week you've been operating on a completely different level. I thought about how to answer that. How do you explain that you've already lived through your failures and learned from them? Let's just say I've been doing a lot of thinking about what I really want, I said finally, and I decided to stop playing small. Karen smiled. Well, keep it up. You're making waves. On June 7th, 3 days before the stock split, I received a formal letter from my parents' attorney. They were demanding I repay them for 18 years of child-rearing expenses, citing food, clothing, education, and shelter. The total, $180,000. The exact amount they'd wanted for Jennifer's wedding. I actually laughed. It was so absurd, so transparent that I couldn't help it. I forwarded the letter to Lisa Chen with a simple note. Is this legal? Her response came within an hour. Not even slightly. Parents cannot retroactively bill their children. For basic care, this is harassment. I'm drafting a cease and desist, but I had a better idea. Don't send it yet, I told Lisa over the phone. I want to wait 3 more days. May I ask why? Because in 3 days, thus, they're going to feel very, very stupid. And I want them to feel it as deeply as possible. Lisa was quiet for a moment. Emily, I don't know what you know that I don't, but I'm starting to really enjoy working with you. June 10th, 2024. I woke up at 6 a.m. before the market opened and made myself a perfect cup of coffee. Then I sat on my couch with my laptop and waited. At 9:30 a.m. Eastern, NVIDIA announced the 100-to-1 stock split, effective immediately. My phone started buzzing within seconds. I watched my Fidelity account refresh. 1,047 shares became 124,700 shares. The price per share adjusted from $176.43 to $1.76, keeping the total value the same, for now. But I knew what was coming. In the original timeline, I'd watched from the outside as NVIDIA's stock had climbed and climbed, driven by the AI boom that I was now writing about, that I was helping to explain to the public. By 10 a.m., the stock was at $2.15. By noon, $2,087. By market close, $342. My portfolio value, $426,474. I'd gained $206,000 in a single day. My phone was a constant vibration of notifications, but I ignored them all. Instead, I opened my laptop and started writing my next article. Inside NVIDIA's historic stock split, why this is just the beginning. The real calls started coming that evening. Emily, Mom's voice was strained, tight. We need to talk. About what? I asked pleasantly, curled up on my couch with a bowl of pasta and a glass of wine. We heard about the stock split. Oh, that? Yes, it's been an interesting day. I took a sip of wine. My financial advisor is very pleased. Emily, you have to understand, we didn't know. If you'd known that Grandma's gift would be valuable, you would have… What? Been nicer to me? Not demanded I give it away? Silence. The thing is, Mom, Grandma knew exactly what she was doing when she left those shares to me. Aunt Carol told me that Grandma specifically set up the inheritance that way because she wanted me to have security. She saw how you and Dad always favored Jennifer. She wanted to balance the scales. I kept detailed records of every conversation we've had about this, I said calmly. The texts, the emails, the voicemails, that legal letter about child rearing expenses. My attorney has everything. Another long silence. What do you want? Mom asked finally. And there it was. Not an apology, not regret, just the cold calculation of what it would take to get access to my money. I don't want anything from you, I said. I just want to be left alone to manage my inheritance as I see fit. The same inheritance you wanted me to liquidate 3 weeks ago for Jennifer's wedding. We made a mistake. No, you showed me exactly who you are, and I'm grateful for that clarity. I hung up, Jennifer called next, then Dad, then Sloan somehow as if she had any standing in this conversation. I declined every call. Instead, I texted Aunt Carol, "Hey, are you free for that coffee this weekend?" Her response was immediate. "I'm free right now if you want company. I'm guessing you're getting some interesting calls tonight." Me, "You have no idea. Want to come over? I'm in Brooklyn. I'll order Thai food." Aunt Carol, "Be there in 45 minutes. And Emily, your grandmother would be so proud of you right now." Aunt Carol arrived with a bottle of excellent wine and a knowing smile. She was in her 60s with gray hair she'd never bothered to dye and laugh lines around her eyes that spoke of a life well lived. "I knew this day would come," she said, settling onto my couch. "Not the stock split specifically, but the day you'd finally stand up to them." "How long have you known what they're like?" "Since we were kids," she said simply. "Your father was always the golden child, could do no wrong. I was the problem, the difficult one. Sound familiar?" It did. God, it did. "I stopped talking to them about 15 years ago," Carol continued. "Best decision I ever made." They only call when they want something, and they cannot fathom why anyone would prioritize their own well-being over the family's demands. What made you finally cut them off? Carol took a long sip of wine. Your father asked me to invest in his business. I said no because I'd looked at his books and knew it was a sinking ship. He told me I was selfish and unsupportive. Your mother sent me a letter about how family should help family. Meanwhile, they'd just bought a second car and a timeshare in Florida. She laughed bitterly. The business went under a year later. Never got an apology. That's going to happen again in November, I said without thinking. Carol's eyes sharpened. What? I paused. I'd gotten so comfortable with my foreknowledge that I'd slipped. But looking at Carol, at this woman who'd been ostracized for setting boundaries, I made a decision. His business partner is embezzling from him, I said. It's going to come to light in November. He's going to lose almost everything. How do you know that? I met her eyes. Let's just say I have very good sources. And Carol, when it happens, they're going to come to you for money. Don't give it to them. She studied me for a long moment, then nodded slowly. You've changed, Emily. There's something different about you. I stopped being afraid of losing people who were never really there for me, I said. Carol raised her glass. To freedom from family obligation. We drank to that. Over the next 3 months, I watched my family's desperation intensify from a comfortable distance. Jennifer's wedding went forward. They'd found a cheaper venue and scaled back their plans dramatically. The photos on social said, media showed a perfectly nice wedding, but I could read Jennifer's disappointment in every forced smile. She'd wanted a fairy tale. She'd gotten a reality check. Meanwhile, my life was expanding in ways I'd never imagined in my first timeline. My articles about AI and tech were getting major traction. I was invited to speak at SXSW, to consult for venture capital firms, to appear on CNBC as an expert commentator. And my NVIDIA stock? By September, it was trading at $4.87 per share. My portfolio value? $607,099. Over $500,000. And this was just the beginning. In early October, Jennifer separated from Brandon. I heard about it through Aunt Carol, who still had connections to the family gossip network. He was having an affair, Carol reported over our now regular Sunday brunch. Apparently, it started about 2 months after the wedding. Jennifer is devastated. I felt nothing. In my first life, I would have rushed to comfort her despite everything. This time, I just nodded and changed the subject. I'm thinking about buying an apartment, I said. Something bigger, maybe in Manhattan. Carol grinned. Look at you playing in the big leagues. I've learned that money is just a tool, I said. It can't buy happiness, but it can buy security and options and the ability to say no to people who don't have your best interests at heart. Wisest thing I've heard all week. November 15th, 2024. Right on schedule, Dad's business partner was arrested for embezzlement. The news hit the local papers. $2.3 million stolen over 4 years, hidden through creative accounting. My father was ruined, not just financially, but reputationally. His business collapsed within a week. I received an email from Mom 3 days later. Emily, I know we haven't spoken in months, and I know things ended badly between us. But your father needs help. His business is gone, we're facing bankruptcy, and we have nowhere else to turn. I'm asking you, as your mother, to please help us. We need $100,000 to avoid losing the house. I know we made mistakes with how we handled the situation with Jennifer's wedding. We should have been more understanding of your position. We're sorry, please. We're desperate. Mom. I read it 3 times, looking for genuine remorse and finding only performative apology designed to unlock my bank account. I drafted several responses, angry ones, self-righteous ones, detailed explanations of why they'd burned this bridge. In the end, I sent this. Mom, I'm sorry to hear about Dad's situation. That must be very stressful. However, I am not in a position to help financially. As you may recall, you and Dad sent me a legal letter demanding $180,000 in child-rearing expenses just 5 months ago. Your attorney claimed I owed you this money. I have to assume that if I owed you money, then you don't need money from me now. Additionally, in your own words from our last conversation about Jennifer's wedding, family helps family. I seem to remember when I needed help with student loans, I was told my education was impractical and not worthy of family support. I took out $80,000 in loans and paid every penny back myself. I've learned a lot from this family about financial independence and self-reliance. Thank you for those lessons. I wish you the best in resolving this situation. Emily. I didn't include a single mention of my own financial situation, my growing portfolio, or my success. That information was need to know, and they didn't need to know. The holidays that year were peaceful. I spent Thanksgiving with Aunt Carol and her chosen family, a group of friends she'd collected over the years who'd also extricated themselves from toxic family dynamics. We called ourselves the Orphans by Choice, and it was the best Thanksgiving I'd ever had. Christmas I spent in the Maldives. Solo travel, five-star resort, diving with whale sharks, and reading books on the beach. I posted exactly one photo on Instagram, me on a sunset beach, champagne in hand with the caption, "Grateful for the gift of choosing myself." Jennifer left a comment. Must be nice. I deleted it without responding. By January 2025, my Nvidia stock was trading at $6.23 per share. My portfolio value had crossed $727,000. But more importantly, I'd been headhunted by a major tech company to lead their content strategy division. The salary was $280,000 plus equity. I took it without hesitation. I also bought my Manhattan apartment, a beautiful two-bedroom with views of Central Park. I paid cash, using the dividends and some strategic selling of my position. I still held 100,000 shares of Nvidia. At my housewarming party, Aunt Carol pulled me aside. "You're building an incredible life," she said. "I'm so happy for you." "I had a good teacher," I said, squeezing her hand. "You showed me it was possible to be happy without their approval." "Have you heard from them lately?" "Jennifer sends passive-aggressive comments on my social media about once a month. Mom emails every few weeks asking to reconnect. Dad sent me a Christmas card with a handwritten note about how we should let bygones be bygones." I shrugged. I don't respond. "Good," Carol said firmly. "You don't owe them your peace." March 25. Nvidia's stock hit $8.94 per share. My 100,000 shares were worth $894,000. Combined with my other investments and my apartment, my net worth had crossed $2.3 million. I was 32 years old and financially independent. In my first life, I'd been dying at this age. The irony was not lost on me. It was in April that Jennifer finally broke. She showed up at my apartment building unannounced. The doorman called up, and I almost told him to send her away. But curiosity got the better of me. She looked terrible, thinner than I'd ever seen her, with dark circles under her eyes and cheap highlights growing out. "Emily," she said when I opened the door. "Please, I just need 5 minutes." I didn't invite her in. We stood in my doorway, this woman who'd tormented me my entire life, looking up at me with tears in her eyes. "I need help," she said. "Brandon cleaned out our joint account when he left. I have nothing. Mom and Dad can't help. They're barely keeping the lights on. I need to borrow some money to get back on my feet." "No," I said simply. "Please, I'm your sister." "You were my sister when you demanded I liquidate my inheritance for your wedding. You were my sister when you called me selfish for wanting to keep Grandma's gift. You were my sister when you supported Mom and Dad sending me that legal letter demanding child-rearing expenses." I kept my voice level, calm. "You were my sister through all of that. And now, when you need something, suddenly that bond matters again. I made mistakes. You made choices," I corrected. "You chose to prioritize your wants over my needs. You chose to support Mom and Dad's manipulation. You chose to post passive-aggressive comments on my social media instead of being happy for my success. Those were all choices." "I'm sorry," she whispered. "Are you sorry or are you broke?" She flinched. "If I'd sold that stock like you wanted me to," I continued, "I'd be in the exact same position you're in right now. Worse, probably, because I wouldn't have had a wealthy fiancé to fall back on temporarily. I'd be alone and struggling, just like you are now. Would you have helped me?" She didn't answer. We both know you wouldn't have, I said. So why should I help you? Because I'm family. Family is supposed to build each other up, not tear each other down for parts. You're not my family, Jennifer. You're just someone I'm related to. I closed the door. She stood in the hallway crying for 10 minutes before she left. I watched on the door camera, feeling still nothing. That's the thing about living through your worst nightmare once. Nothing in the sequel can touch you. By June 2025, exactly 1 year after the stock split, NVIDIA was trading at $11.47 per share. My 100,000 shares were worth $147,000. I took myself out to a Michelin-starred restaurant to celebrate solo. I ordered the tasting menu with wine pairings and sat at the bar chatting with the sommelier about my favorite vineyards. Halfway through the meal, my phone buzzed. An email from Dad. Emily, a year ago you made a decision that hurt this family deeply. Your mother and I have tried to be patient, to give you space to realize your mistake. But enough is enough. Your grandmother would be ashamed of the person you've become. She left you that stock as a responsibility to help your family when needed, and you've hoarded it selfishly. If you don't agree to help your family financially, you need to know that we will not be leaving you anything in our will. Jennifer will inherit everything. You've made your choice, and we're making ours. This is your last chance to do the right thing. Dad, I read it twice, then forwarded it to my attorney with a note. Add this to the file. Also, make sure my will is airtight. Everything goes to charity and Aunt Carol if anything happens to me. Then I deleted the email and went back to my meal. The thing about people who use love as leverage is that they never actually loved you in the first place. They loved what you could do for them. And when you stop performing that function, the love disappears. I'd learned that the hard way in my first life. This time, I was simply confirming what I already knew. September 2025. NVIDIA hit $14.23 per share. My portfolio crossed $1.4 million. I was promoted again at work, this time to VP of Content Strategy. My salary jumped to $380,000. I bought a beach house in the Hamptons as an investment property. I started a scholarship fund for first-generation college students pursuing impractical degrees in the humanities. I donated to women's shelters and mental health organizations. I built the life I dreamed of in my first timeline, the one I'd thought was impossible, and I did it all without my family. November 2025. I was in my office when I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. Emily Harrison? A male voice, professional. Speaking? This is Detective Marcus Chen with the NYPD. I'm calling about your sister, Jennifer Harrison. My heart stopped. What happened? She's fine, he said quickly. Physically, but she was arrested this morning for check fraud. She's been writing bad checks all over the city. When we ran her information, you were listed as her emergency contact. I haven't spoken to my sister in months, I said carefully. I see. Well, her bail is set at $10,000. She asked me to call you. I won't be posting bail, I said. Is there anything else? A pause. Ma'am, she's your sister. Detective Chen, my sister and I are estranged. I am not responsible for her choices or her legal troubles. If there's nothing else, I have a meeting to get to. I hung up. 5 minutes later, Mom called. I declined. Then Dad declined. Then Jennifer herself from jail declined. Finally, a text from a number I didn't recognize. This is Sloan. Jennifer is in jail and you won't even help her? What kind of person are you? You have all this money and you can't spare $10K for your own sister? You're a monster. I blocked the number. That night, Aunt Carol came over with wine and Thai food. Our tradition now. I heard about Jennifer. Bestia, she said. News travels fast. Your mother called me, asked if I would talk to you about posting bail. I looked up sharply. What did you say? I told her that you and I don't have that kind of relationship, that I respect your boundaries too much to pressure you on her behalf. Carol poured us both wine. Then I told her that Jennifer is an adult who made her own choices, and she needs to face the consequences. How did that go over? About as well as you'd expect. She told me I was a terrible aunt and hung up on me. Carol raised her glass. I consider it a badge of honor. We clinked glasses. Do you ever feel guilty? I asked quietly. For walking away? Carol considered the question carefully. Sometimes I feel sad. Sad that they couldn't be the family I wanted them to be. But guilty? No. I gave them so many chances to treat me with basic respect, and they wasted every single one. That's on them, not me. I just keep waiting to feel something, I admitted. Jennifer's in jail and nothing. That's not nothing, Carol said gently. That's healing. You've cauterized the wound. You can't keep bleeding for people who'd drain you dry without a second thought. December 25th, 2025, 18 months after the stock split. NVIDIA was trading at $18.47 per share. My 100,000 shares were worth $1,847,000. With my other investments, my real estate, and my cash savings, my net worth had crossed $3.2 million. I was 32 years old. In my first life, I'd been 6 months dead. I spent Christmas morning in my apartment, drinking excellent coffee and reading. In the afternoon, I volunteered at a soup kitchen, something I'd started doing every week after I'd remembered what it felt like to be hungry and hopeless. That evening, I hosted Christmas dinner at my place. Aunt Carol, of course. My friend Maya from work, who was also estranged from her family. 3 women I'd met at a support group for people recovering from family trauma. My doorman, who had nowhere else to go. We called ourselves the Chosen Family Christmas, and it was perfect. Over dinner, Maya asked the question everyone had been dancing around for months. Have you heard anything from your biological family lately? Mom sent a Christmas card, I said. It had a long letter about forgiveness and how families should stick together through hard times. There was a PS asking if I could help with Jennifer's legal fees. Did you respond? I sent the card back with a note that said, "Return to sender. Recipient has chosen a different family." The table erupted in applause. That's cold, Maya said admiringly. I love it. They had every opportunity to be my family, I said. They chose to be my exploiters instead. I'm just respecting their choice. After dinner, as we sat around with dessert and wine, Carol pulled out an envelope. I have something for you, she said, handing it to me. Your grandmother asked me to give this to you, but only when you were ready. I think you're ready now. My hand shook as I opened it. Inside was a letter in my grandmother's handwriting. My dearest Emily, if you're reading this, Carol has decided you're finally strong enough to understand. I left you those NVIDIA shares for a reason. I knew your parents would favor Jennifer. They always did, even when you girls were small. I knew they'd try to take anything I left you and give it to her, so I made sure the shares were in your name only in a way they couldn't touch, but more than that, I left you those shares because I knew you'd need them. I knew you'd need something that was just yours, something that could give you freedom. I also knew that the technology in those shares would change the world. I was a programmer back when computers filled entire rooms. I recognized what NVIDIA was building, and I knew it would matter. I hoped you'd hold on to them. I hoped they'd give you the security to become who you're meant to be. But most of all, I hoped they'd teach you that you don't owe your gifts to people who don't value you. Your parents will ask you for this money. Jennifer will expect you to share. They'll call you selfish and ungrateful. They'll try to make you feel small and guilty. Don't let them. You are brilliant, Emily. You are kind. You are more than enough exactly as you are, and you deserve to build a life that makes you happy, not them. I love you. I'm proud of you. And I'll be watching from wherever I end up, cheering you on. All my love, Grandma P.S. When you're rich, and you will be, invest in yourself first. Everything else is secondary. I was crying by the time I finished. Carol hugged me tight. She knew, I whispered. She knew exactly what would happen. She knew what they were, Carol said. And she knew what you could be. She bet on you, Emily, and look how right she was. January 2026. I was sitting in a conference room at a venture capital firm, having been asked to consult on their AI investments. The irony of being paid huge sums to tell people what I'd learned by living through the future was not lost on me. My phone buzzed during a break. An email from an address I didn't recognize, but the subject line made my blood run cold. A message from Jennifer. I almost deleted it, but curiosity won. Emily, I'm writing this from a rehabilitation center. Court mandated, before you ask. Part of my program is making amends to people I've hurt. I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't even know if I deserve forgiveness. But I need to say this. You were right about everything. I spent my whole life thinking I deserved more than you just because mom and dad said so. I thought you were the problem. Too sensitive, too difficult, too selfish. But the truth is, I was spoiled and entitled, and I couldn't see past my own wants. When you refused to sell your stock, I was furious. How dare you put yourself first? How dare you deny me what I wanted? But you were protecting yourself, and you were right to do it. If you'd given me that money, I would have wasted it. Just like I wasted everything Brandon gave me, everything mom and dad gave me, every opportunity I ever had. I would have taken your security and blown it on a wedding that lasted less than 2 years. And then, when you needed help, I wouldn't have been there for you. We both know it. I saw your article in Forbes last month, but how it is. I built financial freedom from family pressure. I read it 3 times. I kept waiting for you to mention me, to make me the villain, but you didn't. You just told your story about learning to set boundaries and invest in yourself. The comment section was full of people thanking you. Thousands of people saying you inspired them to stand up to their families, to protect their assets, to choose themselves. You took your pain and turned it into something that helps people. I took mine and turned it into check fraud. I don't expect us to be sisters again. That ship has sailed, but I wanted you to know that I finally understand. You weren't the selfish one. I was. I hope you're happy, Emily. I really do. You deserve it. Jennifer. I read it twice, looking for manipulation, for an angle, but all I found was exhaustion and something that might have been genuine remorse. I didn't respond. Some bridges, once burned, should stay ashes, but I did feel something finally. Not forgiveness. Exactly, but closure. March 2026. Nvidia crossed $22 per share. My portfolio hit $2.2 million. But the real milestone happened in my personal life. I met someone. His name was David. He was a software engineer at Google, and he thought my chosen family Christmas tradition was the coolest thing he'd ever heard. He'd also walked away from a toxic family, and he understood the weight of that choice. On our 3rd date, I told him everything. The family pressure, the stock, my success. I waited for the weirdness, the calculation, the sudden interest in my portfolio. Instead, he said, "That took incredible strength. I'm in awe of you." We moved in together 6 months later, June 2026, 2 years after the stock split. Nvidia hit $26.34 per share. My remaining 100,000 shares were worth $2.6 million. My total net worth crossed $5 million. I was 33 years old, and I was happy. I got an email from Dad that day. No preamble, no fake pleasantries. That stock you refused to share is now worth millions. Money that could have saved our house, helped your sister, kept this family together. I hope you can live with that. I wrote back immediately, I can. Can you live with the fact that you raised one daughter to feel entitled to everything and another to expect nothing? Can you live with the fact that when I needed help with education, I was told my dreams were impractical, but when Jennifer wanted a party, everyone rallied? That stock didn't tear this family apart. You did that decades ago. I just stopped pretending it was my job to hold the pieces together. I'm happy, Dad. I'm successful. I'm surrounded by people who love me for who I am, not what I can give them. I sleep well at night. Can you say the same? Emily, I never heard from him again. December 2026. Nvidia hit $31.47 per share. My shares were worth $3,047,000. David proposed on Christmas Eve. We were at my Hamptons house, sitting by the fireplace with Aunt Carol and our chosen family. I said yes. The wedding was in May 2027, small and perfect. Aunt Carol walked me down the aisle. My friend Maya was my maid of honor. Not a single blood relative was invited. I wore my grandmother's pearls and thought about her letter, about how she'd known all those years ago that I'd need more than money. I'd need the strength to choose myself. At the reception, I gave a toast. 5 years ago, I had to make the hardest decision of my life. I had to choose between my family's approval and my own security, between being liked and being free, between their version of who I should be and who I actually am. I looked around at the faces of people who'd chosen to be here, who'd chosen me without conditions. I chose freedom, and it led me here, to all of you, to this man, to this life. So thank you to everyone who's ever made me feel like I wasn't enough, because you taught me the most valuable lesson. The only person who needs to think I'm enough is me. And thank you to my grandmother, who saw potential in a grandchild everyone else overlooked, and who gave me not just stocks, but the foundation to build something real. The room erupted in applause. Later, as David and I danced, he whispered, "Any regrets?" I thought about my first life, the loneliness, the despair, the death I'd narrowly escaped by some comic miracle of second chances. Then I thought about Jennifer in rehab, my parents in their underwater mortgage, the family that had chosen money over relationship and gotten neither. Not a single one, I said. And I meant it. June 29. NVIDIA was trading at $47.23 per share. My original 1,247 shares, the ones my family had wanted me to sell for $180,000, were now 124,700 shares worth $89,981, nearly $6 million from the investment my grandmother had made in my future. But the real wealth was different. It was the beach house where David and I spent summers. It was the foundation I'd started for, first-generation students. It was Sunday brunches with Aunt Carol and game nights with chosen family. It was the career I loved and the book I'd just sold about financial independence and family boundaries. It was the therapy I could afford, the security I'd built, the freedom to say no. My sister sent me a Facebook friend request that I declined. My mother tried to connect on LinkedIn, blocked. Dad sent a card when he heard about my book deal, returned unopened. Some people think I'm cruel, that family is family and blood is thicker than water. But the full quote is, "The blood of the covenant is thicker than the water of the womb." The bonds we choose are stronger than the ones we're born into. I chose myself. I chose freedom. I chose people who love me without conditions, and I'd make that choice again, every single time. On the shelf in my office, I keep that letter from my grandmother in a frame. Next to it is the first stock certificate she gave me before everything, split and multiplied. A reminder that the best investments aren't just financial. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is protect what's yours. Sometimes the smartest thing you can do is trust your own judgment. And sometimes the most loving thing you can do is walk away from people who only love what you can give them. My family made me sell my stocks for her wedding, but that was in another life. In this one, I kept them, and I kept myself. And I built something beautiful from the ashes of their expectations. The stocks split 100 to 1, just like I knew they would. But more importantly, I split from them. And that was worth more than any portfolio could ever be.